Cale, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, I'm super happy to be here.
I love so much the rules of royalty, and I'm glad we get to talk about it. For our listeners who maybe haven't picked up the story quite yet, tell everybody about the story of Jamie and Eric.
Awesome. Yes, so The Rules of Royalty is a queer YA royal rom-com. It's about two different boys. One of the boys is named Jamie, and he is an American who discovers that he is the prince of a small fictional European country, and he is invited to spend the summer getting to know his royal family and to learn a bit about his royal duties. The other main character is a boy called Eric, who is the spare prince of a neighboring country, and he is sort of a spare prince, and he's getting a little bit older now, and he's sort of starting to struggle with the responsibilities and pressures that are coming with his title as a prince. And so when he receives an invitation to spend the summer kind of spending some time with Jamie, teaching him what it's like to be a prince and teaching him the rules of royalty, where the title comes from. And as those two spend some time together, as what tends to happen in rom-com, feelings start to happen, which are a problem because that's not what is planned for Eric by his royal family. So yeah, so it's a big, hopefully fun royal romp with lots of fun royal things like royal balls and a royal wedding. There's a hedge maze, there's garden party, all the kind of tried to put all of the royal things you would want in a book into this one. So yeah.
I loved that it had the hedge maze because those are always so fun. Like, can you get in?
Yeah.
Can you get out? Who's going to find you where? How did you decide what to put in from that point of view? The hedge maze and all of those like royal rom-com things are so much to choose from. How did you kind of narrow it down?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like I kind of hit all the ones I kind of wanted to. I feel like I think I maybe at the start I knew like Garden Party, especially with as this book is a sort of spin on the Princess Diaries. I was like, Garden Party's a must. Like you've got to have that kind of scene. So, and things like, I don't know. I don't think there was anything that I really wanted to include that I didn't get to. So that was kind of nice.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the Princess Diaries here, and that's something that came up from a member of our Patreon community because Matters of the Heart really wanted to know, why did you choose the Princess Diaries?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for the question, by the way, from them. But yeah, so Princess Diaries, I feel like there's two sort of answers. Short answer is that Princess Diaries is amazing and it's a fun kind of spin, especially if you can kind of spin a gay spin on Princess Diaries. I was like, that sounds amazing and fun and would be something I would love to write. Longer answer is kind of sort of about like basically sort of I had a book that came out called If This Gets Out, which did quite well. So kind of after that one had done well, it was sort of when looking at kind of my next book, I sort of wanted to do something kind of along those lines, like sort of in a contemporary, but also for people who don't know, that book was about two boys in a boy band who have a romance. So it's kind of a contemporary story, but has kind of like a heightened element to it. And so I was thinking, if you want to do like something heightened like that again, it kind of made sense to go with royals. And then with Princess Diaries, it's sort of as a kind of, contemporary story, real people, not fantasy, but it has that kind of spectacle and scope and things, which is sort of what I wanted to write about. And Princess Diaries sort of came about. I had a call with my agent and editor, and we were kind of hashtagging, brainstorming kind of things. And as soon as Princess Diaries came up, everybody was super excited. So I was kind of like, that's a great direction to go in. And yeah, that's kind of how it ended up being Princess Diaries, longer version, other than just I like it and I think it's cool.
And it's nice to bring back a film that's got to be, gosh, what is it, like at least 30 years old now, maybe?
Yeah, totally. And also the one that's quite old now and that hasn't really left the like public conscious really. Like I guess it's on streaming and Princess Diaries 3 is about to they've announced that they're working on it. And just the way the internet just exploded just with so much hype about this movie. I think it's a comfort movie for a lot of people and it's, so yeah.
Matters of the Heart was also curious, like, were there specific elements from the Princess Diaries? You mentioned the garden party for one that you really wanted to keep, and were there other things you're like, I want to tweak that or even leave certain things out? Like, how did you kind of pick out the things to put into your queer version?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. I feel like for me, I tried to put a lot of sort of Easter eggs. I don't want to say exactly what they were. The things that, for me, like it was kind of, I wanted to take it so kind of had a kind of basis of the Princess Diaries, but kind of spun a little bit in its own kind of direction. So influence, but not so much a straight retelling. I kind of wanted it to be, I sort of like a little bit different, like things like with Eric's point of view being in it as well. It's kind of like the two sides of things. So it kind of shapes its own identity. But yeah, the things that I really enjoyed were little lines from Princess Diaries, the little runaway jokes that I kind of threw in there just to kind of see if someone was a big fan of the Princess Diaries, they kind of get this like, oh, they mentioned that line or things like that. So yeah, that's sort of the things I really wanted to include, just some of the famous lines, little spins on those.
Now I need to go back and see it again because I was realizing as I was reading it that I haven't seen the Princess Diaries all the way through in
Yeah,
quite a few years because it's something that's like, oh, this
yeah,
is on. I'll watch that.
yeah. It's a good time. Highly recommend it. It's a very fun, yeah, fun movie.
How did you go about world building your kingdoms? Because here
Mm,
you do have two kingdoms
mm.
that you're dealing with, and you have to build them, but obviously you can't make them exactly the same either. Kind of what was your
Yeah,
thought process?
yeah, thank you. These are such good questions, by the way. Thank you. It's super fun to talk about this. Yeah, I mean, so I've written in kind of different genres, but they all tend to be fairly contemporary-ish. Like my first book had some sci-fi elements in it, but I've never done this kind of huge sort of world, like fantasy world building. And a book like this, you kind of have to because you are creating, a new kingdom or two new kingdoms. So my thought process, I kind of decided to base one of the countries, it's sort of based on a fictionalized Spain, and the other one is sort of based on a kind of more northern European kind of icier kind of country. And kind of a mix of a few different places there. So I kind of tried to take things from there and kind of remix them a little bit into a new country. And that was kind of my ideas for it, and other things like I created a festival sort of things that were kind of sort of inspired by real things, but tried to do a bit of a spin on it. But yeah, it was really fun. It was fun to come up with two whole new countries.
Two new places and yet have them be contemporary at the same
Yeah,
time. So you're not just
yeah,
like making up things from the past or something. These are like
no,
now and they're just over there
yeah,
somewhere.
yeah, and yeah, exactly. But it was yeah, it was fun. It was a fun challenge. So
You mentioned doing the dual point of view here, and I really liked getting both of those because Eric and Jamie both learned so much from each other. I mean, when it comes down to it, Eric is there to teach Jamie how to be a royal, but Jamie also kind of helps him realize that there could be a little bit more in there too, and they're balancing that kind of education and teaching with this burgeoning romance. How was it to balance out? I need to give them a romance moment versus I need to let them have a growth moment that's outside the romance.
yeah, totally. So I feel like that was something I kind of focused more on when I was sort of in the very early initial stages. I was like, what are their arcs that I want to kind of hit? So I kind of focused really on making sure those arcs were kind of there because you're totally right. I really did want their arcs to kind of intermingle a little bit with the romance. I thought that would be that they do both sort of benefit each other in terms of just not just like falling in love with each other, but also kind of helping each other grow. And so I kind of liked that their sort of meeting was sort of intertwined in that way with their arcs. I kind of liked that they both helped each other. I thought that was kind of nice for it to be romantic as well as like sort of inspiring growth in each of them. So I don't remember sort of struggling about thinking which one I should do or not, because I kind of always envisioned them as being they are falling for each other while they are helping each other grow. And that was kind of my intention throughout writing it, to have they both happen at the sort of same time. So yeah, I don't remember it being too stuck on either of those, but yeah, it was an intentional choice.
That's nice that it kind of sounds like it kind of came organically, how to just
Mm,
weave them together a little bit.
yeah, yeah.
Are you a plotter for the most part, or do you like just try to write and make it up as you go, or something in between there?
Yeah, I am a reformed pantser. So like I used to just kind of write the way sort of pretty much sort of I would just be like, let's just see where this goes. But after I wrote If This Gets Out with Sophie, who is such a thorough planner, I kind of saw like the advantages of planning things out to the degree of kind of wanting to see where things are going to go. So I sort of became more of a plotter. I still kind of try and let things happen naturally because I feel like that's where you get some really cool scenes if something kind of surprises you and you get like a fun kind of rabbit hole. I'm always going to want to follow that. But I tend to now I am much more of someone that goes, okay, here's the arc. Let's see how we're going to get this person from where they are at the start of the book to where they are at the end. And I feel like that can kind of be satisfying as a reader and can be helpful when writing it.
Did Sophie, since she's such a planner, did that force you to plan a little bit on If This Gets Out to kind of make all of it fit together?
Oh yeah, yeah. We were very on the same page throughout that book. Like in terms of like we had a few like even from very early on we had these long Twitter DM conversations about where we wanted things to kind of go. And then we had a Google Doc that had the synopsis in it and it was that's what is to be followed. And there was only one time I wrote one chapter that wasn't correct, like wasn't in the right thing. And she was like, no, you can't do that. And I was like, that is very fair. So then I went back and revised that chapter and we kind of did it together. But yeah, she was totally right. I think that one, yeah, but it was all born from those kind of conversations we had. Like we'd agreed to this kind of plan. I think that one was because it was quite late in the book and we had drafted it quite quickly. So it was like, I think I was just like, my energy level was low and I made a mistake.
I like how you mentioned too that it was that book that like got your mind thinking towards this one in terms of the hyper reality of it, because there's only a few things usually around celebrity or royalty, which is a type of celebrity where you kind of get
Hmm.
that all eyes can be on you and you're expected to do certain things.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, going from boy band to royalty, there are some key kind of differences. But yeah, it is kind of that same pressure of fame and expectation and people that are powerful and above you that kind of have this sort of control over you. And if you're coming of age in that world, I think it can be extremely difficult. I mean, I have no experience being in a boy band or royal, but at the same time, it's like that how do you figure out who you are when there are a group of people that have very strong interests in controlling exactly what you do, how you act, like what your public persona is, like how do you figure out who you're going to be in that scenario? And I think both books kind of tackle that same sort of question in kind of different ways. But yeah.
Yeah. Vastly different ways, because from what I remember about If This Gets Out, because it's been a year or so since I read that, I guess the agents and the managers were horrible and I wanted to just
Yes.
crush them all.
Yeah.
Whereas opposed to here, everybody's family for the most
Yeah.
part, and I
Yeah.
won't spoil anything here, for the most part are like incredibly loving and generous and kind. And I
Mm.
loved every single one of them for just the
Oh.
support they were giving to both of these young men.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I think sort of in writing this one, I think I did want, and I think that kind of does come down to a little bit of the Princess Diaries influence too, in that it's a kind of a softer, younger kind of sort of thing. Like it's a little bit, I feel like this one kind of doesn't get as dark as If This Gets Out does. And
Mm.
that's intentional because Princess Diaries is a sort of film of it's like loved by all ages, but it is a younger, it's more almost middle grade. It's like it's very sort of younger, that kind of thing. And so I wanted this one to still be a young adult book, but kind of maybe be a little bit softer and kind of sort of a bit rosier about things. Yeah, and plus, yeah, that's If This Gets Out, it's its own kind of thing. So it's kind of a separate. I didn't want to do the same kind of dynamic. It's kind of a different exploration.
Yeah. What I was expecting, just having taken in so many royal stories, Grandmother the Queen accepted. I expected for there to be like one head of the household or a major domo type who was really going to try to make sure things went a certain way.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't there. And I was so happy about that.
Oh, nice, cool. Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. It's hard because with royal stories, like you do, they're so sort of kind of prevalent that it's sort of like you don't know which ones. Like you want to give people what they want to read, but you don't want to give like exactly what's already been done a million times before because you don't want to. So it's kind of choosing which things that are satisfying but also not overdone, or it could be a tough thing to balance. But yeah.
Yeah. And in particular, in terms of the family, I really have to give a shout out to Eric's brother, Stefan, who is the crown prince in his family, and his soon to be wife, Elise. They just warmed my heart so much for how they were
Oh,
trying to
nice.
guide Eric a little bit on what he was trying to get through and could his romance work out or not. And I just found them to be so lovely. There's no other word for what they were.
Yeah, I really like those two as well.
You also gave Jamie a load of terrific friends. And I have to say, if there was anything, I wish we could have seen more of them. I completely understand why we don't, because they're not completely relevant to the story here. But he had a good friend group too, who had to navigate some things with their friend changing in unexpected ways. But how did you decide the friends to give him? Because they are each kind of very specific in some roles that they fill, and even, what they're bringing to the page in terms of the queerness of the story as well.
Good question. Yeah. So when you have sort of like a dual POV kind of story like this, kind of was looking for kind of differences between the two. And just when I thought of Jamie as a character, I always kind of envisioned him as a character with a really strong friend group, especially sort of before he kind of goes on this adventure. That's just kind of how I pictured him, as just having this surrounded by this group of people. And then kind of also sort of I was thinking as well with a story like this, like a surprise royal kind of narrative, I wanted to see like what was this boy like before he gets this kind of reveal. And I always kind of pictured he'd have a big group of friends, he'd have lots of people that he is connected to, and then this surprise gets dropped on him, not like he exists on the page as soon as that happens. But yeah, I think that was just a fun kind of group to kind of flesh out and kind of think, who would this boy be friends with if he was in high school, and who would he hang out with? And that's how that group kind of formed.
I loved them so much.
Oh,
They were just
thank
so
you.
much fun. The different
Yeah.
things they were doing every time they showed up on the page.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
So a question I did not prepare you for. So you may have to
Mm.
think about this one for a second. What was your favorite scene to write?
Ooh. Ooh, that's a tough one. Let me have a think. I did really enjoy the garden conversation between Jamie and Eric, one of their early first sort of meetings. I really enjoyed that one. I enjoyed, oh, there were some pool scenes I enjoyed. It's hard to think about a specific one scene that I enjoyed, especially because I kind of just enjoyed most of the things. But yeah, I like those two.
And then kind of connected to that, what, if anything, had you doing the most research into how it should probably play out?
Mm. So, research about things, I think a lot of my research was sort of more kind of to familiarize myself with just sort of like the royal side of things. I don't know if there was a particular one thing that I was like, I'm going to do a bunch of heavy research on this. I did a lot of research about countries and world building and things like that.
You've written many different types of stories across the books that you've put out. We've got the boy band book that we talked about with If This Gets Out. You've done a thriller with the love interest. You've done an homage to slasher movies with The Pledge. Now you've got royals. How do you decide kind of what you want to write, since you're kind of visiting subgenres of YA so often?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a really good question. We can hash it out if you like, because
Absolutely.
there's
Let's
very
hash it out.
specific reasons. Yes. So pretty much, so basically, in my experience, a lot of the times I'm writing queer YA, right? So that does give me some genre flexibility in terms that maybe some other, because when you look at like what a publisher looks at, a lot of the times they'll look at my book as a queer book first and foremost. The genre is almost kind of secondary. Like rom-coms are a little bit different. That's a rom-com, but it's like there's a little bit of flexibility there in terms of being a queer author. Like you kind of see a lot of queer authors do kind of bounce a little bit in genre around. So yeah, so my first book was The Love Interest, which was, yes, a thriller, but it was also a kind of meta, like sort of cross genre. It had sci-fi elements in it as well. So it was kind of this cross genre thing already. And then so once you have something like that, it's sort of like, okay, that's your lane, but it kind of, that was a thriller. They sort of almost like took the thriller elements and that was very prominent in the marketing of it. And then it was like, do another thriller in that. So my second book was a thriller. And then I had the idea of, oh, if this gets out, which was a romance. And that was because I loved that idea and I really wanted to work with Sophie. So then I have a romance book. And then it's like, once you have a romance, they want you to do another romance. So that's where the Royals came in. So it kind of happened with books that kind of had done well. And then there was wanting to continue in that direction. Mostly the big divergent was If This Gets Out, which kind of was this sort of offshoot thing because I was collaborating with somebody else. And that kind of put me in the romance space, which I was super happy to be in and happy to continue in. So kind of just moves around that way. But I think the question was, how do I decide which genre to do? Sorry, went on a little bit of a tangent. But the how do I decide? A lot of it is kind of based on that sort of thinking like, okay, so like with Royals, it was sort of the decision, a lot of it was, what could you do in a space that sort of follows on from that last book, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like that. But the sort of my next book, it was kind of very much just, I had this idea that I wanted to do and I was very excited about it. And so I'm just going in that direction. So yeah, maybe I just bounce around a lot. I'm not sure.
Bouncing around at least keeps it interesting, in some cases. Different
Yeah.
genres require pulling out different writing techniques and everything.
Yeah. I will say, so my next book's it's a romance again. It's a little bit different, but that's kind of a space that I really do want to kind of stay in for a while. So fingers crossed, we will see. But that one is a lane that kind of, I think I've kind of moved around genres a little bit, kind of seeing where I'm happiest writing wise. And I think this kind of next one I think feels very much a lane that kind of melds everything that I like, and we'll see where that goes.
What is it about romance that is kind of where you think you want to be? I mean, 2 books in, maybe this third one as well.
I think I am a big fan of, I like lighter books. I like romance. Like I love like a love story. I think that's great and very exciting and fun to write about. But yeah, I view myself as kind of, I like things that are lighter. I like things that are kind of funny. That's kind of just where I naturally like to go. I sort of enjoy that. And I think that just tends to lend to romance or rom-coms because I think I like books that are romantic and funny. And that's kind of where those are. So not that you can't do a romantic and funny fantasy or something, but that's kind of where I feel happiest. Something that I really enjoy about romantic comedies or something along those lines, particularly the books that I like to write. I like having sort of a contemporary love story between two boys, but with a kind of heightened spectacle element that kind of takes it somewhere sort of that feels quite a bit like bigger in terms of scope, something like a boy band or a royal or something along those lines. I just think that's fun to write about.
Mm-hmm. And rom-coms lend themselves so well to that kind of heightened something.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and you see like tropes a lot too in rom-coms, like yeah, those big kind of trope kind of things, which are fun as well.
Do you have a favorite trope or two?
Ooh, yeah, I like fake dating. Fake dating's fun, and I like There's Only One Bed is good too. So both of those probably. Which is your favorite? Do you have one?
I love second chances,
Yeah,
which is hard to do in YA, but I do love
yeah,
second
yeah,
chances. And friends to lovers, I love a lot too, because you come with such backstory. And I think friends to lovers can work well in young adult, where you can't have second chances that also have a lot of that history to them.
mm,
But you could also never miss out with like forced proximity, only one bed.
no,
I have to admit, and we won't get into too many spoilers on this at all, because I think it's a very interesting aspect to this book. There's some interesting fake dating stuff that you've built in to Rules of
yes.
Royalty.
Oh yes,
And
yes.
that spin on it with these 2 participants in the fake dating. And I've never really seen it discussed between the fake daters in such a very frank way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, kind of what's it like to fake date if it's not the heart of the rom-com? I think I just thought that was kind of interesting. So yeah, if that's specifically what you're talking about. But yes,
Yeah, you and I are on the same page with what that means. And people who read the book later will go, "Oh, that," because there's only one fake dating couple in this book.
yeah, because
But
fake
it's
dating if you don't like the person is not a good time.
yeah, and you really don't want to do it anyway. So you love romance and rom-com. How did you end up with your first couple books being thriller and slasher inspired?
so Love Interest is kind of a weird book for me. It is like I love it. It's very, very me. But that whole book was inspired by the idea of like at the time as well. It's less prevalent now, but at the time, the love triangle trope, right? So there's two boys fighting over one girl. The whole premise of that book is what if the two boys got together? And it kind of became a thriller in terms of this weird, it's very meta. It's very like, I wanted it to kind of seem like it was kind of commenting on other young adult novels. Like, what if behind the scenes of that love triangle, there was this whole shadowy organization that was controlling the two boys and was making like them act in certain ways. So it was very messing with those tropes. Like one of the boys is the nice guy and he's the boy next door and he like wears sweaters and is sweet, and the other one's like a bad boy and he wears leather jackets. And the whole sort of premise of that was kind of playing with those tropes. So for me, it was kind of like once it was going through like being published, it was kind of interesting for me that it kind of this book that was kind of did have thriller elements in it, but it kind of ended up being marketed very thriller-esque, which I was on board with because I love that cover and it did have those elements to it. But I was like, I remember once it got a book deal, I was like, how are they going to do a cover for this? Because it's this like wink wink book, right? Like how do you market that? So once that sort of came out, it kind of like because I remember getting the past pages and they were very kind of techy and spy-y, and I was like, oh, okay, they're going in this kind of spy marketing kind of direction. And so yeah, so that was kind of once that was decided, I was in the kind of thriller lane, and then they're like, you've just got to stay in the thriller lane. And I was like, cool. Because I think that was the kind of question that was tough for me was how do you follow up a meta sci-fi romance like mixed genre book, which I think are cool, but how do you you got to pick a lane. So that's how I kind of ended up in thrillers. And for The Pledge, which was a slasher, that was the second book of a two-book deal. So I had written one book before the Friends Game. It was after was a thriller, and they were my publisher at the time was like, "What do you think about doing horror? Because horror is really popular at the moment." And I was like, "Cool, I'll do horror because I love slashes and I love horror." So that's what happened with that one.
In the last year or 18 months or so, we've seen several YA authors, queer YA authors, make the jump to doing adult romance and adult rom-coms. Is that something you're thinking about in the future at all, or are you primarily going to stay in the YA kind of genre?
Yeah, like I'm very, very, very happy staying in YA. You're totally right. A lot of people are moving into adult. I think queer YA, I mean, I feel like you would have some thoughts on this. I think it's kind of in this interesting space at the moment. I don't really know exactly what's going on with it, but it feels like it's kind of shifting a little bit. So we'll see. And yeah, a lot of authors are switching to adult or hopefully still continuing to do YA, but also adult. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Interview reversal. As far as I know, the authors I've talked to seem to want to continue to do both. There's certainly a bit of a shift I've seen, at least in the US market. And I don't have a good sense, around the world, but I feel like where we saw a lot of YA in going between 2020 and 2022, maybe into 23, there was a lot of queer YA, a lot of amazing queer YA, new authors coming in, authors of color, authors all along the queer spectrum. I worry that with all the book bans that have happened in the US and continue to happen, that I don't know if publishers are starting to, reconsider what they were doing in terms of diversifying YA. I hope not, because so much of it, I've read some amazing books the last couple of years. And I know there's always that lag, right, between the book getting accepted and the book coming out a year, 18 months, whatever later. So I don't know that we're just hitting a little bit of a plateau here, or if it's more of a drop off, or I guess the next year will kind of show, maybe where some of that's going. Because on the flip side, you've got stuff like, Heartstopper continues to be massively popular as a book and as a TV show and things like that. So I don't know that my tea leaves are necessarily good ones, but I do feel like there's been a slight drop from what we saw a couple years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's kind of, I feel like saying plateau. I'm like, that's kind of where it's sort of, I don't know. I mean, so my first book came out in 2017, and that was still very kind of like, there had been queer YA books, but there wasn't that huge kind of explosion that happened in about, I think probably, was it about 2020? Like, or sort of ramping up from 2017? Like,
I feel like 2021 is kind of, it
yeah,
hit an apex there and then kind of stayed high for a little bit, and it's kind of, but
yeah,
also, I mean, I don't know about the broader YA genre either. Like, has
no.
contemporary YA in and of itself kind of backed off in favor of other aspects? Because I don't read a lot of fantasy and that sci-fi side of YA.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it as well. I think it's maybe not just queer YA, but contemporary, like pure contemporaries, I think are in a like seem to be in a quiet spot. But I think these things come and go up and down all the time. I feel like contemporaries, especially publishers, I think they're really chasing that like big, like commercial kind of hook sort of thing, which can happen in contemporary, but I think that's kind of it seems like contemporary slowing down a little bit and romanticy's kind of taking. But I feel like there's always going to be space for a contemporary book, but I'm definitely noticing some like contemporary seeming to be a bit slowing down a little bit.
Yeah. And romantasy, I haven't picked up any YA romantasy yet, but I did read recently an adult queer romantasy, and I just was like, this is the best thing ever. Page turner, page turner, page turner.
Oh, what was it? What book was it?
Sword Crossed from Freya Marsk,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
also an Australian,
Oh, nice.
it turns
Cool.
out.
The queer Australians are coming for publishing.
But I just thought that was just an excellent book that I would
Cool.
totally read more of. So you hinted a little bit about, this next thing that you're working on, it's going to be a romance. Is there anything else you can kind of tease us about that?
So that one, this is the first time this has ever happened for me in my like career. Like the book's pretty much done. Like it's like I'm doing the third draft now, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. And not because they're wanting to be like coy or anything. It's just that I've been told from marketing what they want to do is do like a cover reveal and a premise reveal at the same time. So
Okay.
they want to just be like, surprise, here it is. Like, here's the cover, it's done, react pretty much. So yeah, so I can't say anything about it. Not I don't want to be like that. I've just said that's what they want to do with this one, which I think is cool because I feel like that'll make sort of the premise reveal, I think, kind of have a bit of an impact, which will
Sure.
be
Yeah.
cool. But there are some things going on behind the scenes. Yeah, there's some target stuff going on. So we'll see what
That's
happens with it.
exciting.
But yeah, I'm really, really excited about this one. I think it's really it's different for me. It feels like I've kind of melding a lot of things that I'm interested in and have become more experienced at nailing down what I like as an author and who my like brand is.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Coming out in 2025.
Yes. Yeah. It is has a release date. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that either.
So as we wrap up, we've got to get some recommendations for our listeners.
Hmm.
What are you reading or watching that you would recommend to everybody?
Okay. Ooh, good question. I haven't started reading yet, but I've just bought a little while ago. I bought Prince of the Palisades by Julian Winters, which
So
it's
good.
good. Yeah, yeah. I've loved like Julian Winters' work, so I'm very very excited to read that one. I was waiting until spooky season was over because I tend to read sort of horror books around September, October, and so then I'm like, Prince of the Palisades is waiting for me, which I'm very excited about. I was also reading Clown in a Cornfield 2 which is a very fun slasher book if anyone's interested in that. Quite a good like queer representation in that one too, which is nice.
Excellent. Prince of the Palisades, 100% thumbs up, highly recommend. And I
Awesome.
will maybe do that other one in spooky season 2025.
Yeah, just wait until then. Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm going to read horror, I should put it in the right season.
Yeah, it's weird now because I haven't finished reading it yet, so I'm still like spooky season's over, but I'm still still reading the horror books. But I'll be done soon, and then I'll be moving on to contemporaries and romances.
Nice. And what is the best way for everybody to keep up with you online so they can, find out more as the Rules of Royalty comes out, but also, be ready for the big reveal of the next book next year?
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter. Just search my name. I'm Cale R. Dietrich at Instagram. But yeah, just if you search Cale Twitter, have my website. And I'm starting out TikTok, but very, very slowly. Yeah, so around there.
Fantastic. We will link up to all that along with everything that we talked about in our conversation in our show notes. Cale, I'm so happy we got to talk about the Rules of Royalty. I wish you all the success with it.
Awesome. Thank you for talking to me.